Hello, Wonderhussy here. You know, if I could live anywhere on Earth, if I could live anywhere on Earth, I'd probably live in Malibu or someplace on the coast. But if I couldn't live on the coast, and I could pick anywhere else on Earth, well, I might choose to live right here in beautiful Red Rock Canyon. What's now called Red Rock Canyon National Conservation Area is right outside Las Vegas, just a few miles from the western edge of town. But it feels like you're 100 miles, or more importantly, 100 years away from Vegas, and that's just part of what makes this place so special. Even today, with the western Vegas suburbs creeping up closer and closer, it still feels wild and remote out here. Colorful cliffs tower above red sandstone formations, which used to be prehistoric sand dunes. I don't know very much about geology, but apparently some kind of massive geologic forces created all this about 65 million years ago. It was called the Keystone Thrust, when one plate of the Earth forced another plate of the Earth underneath it. And I guess the plate on top had the older limestone rocks on it and forced itself up over a plate with the much younger red sandstone rocks on it. And I guess that's very unusual in geology. Normally, old rocks are underneath new rocks. But out here, everything's topsy-turvy because of this Keystone Thrust. And it created this amazing escarpment with all these towering cliffs that are just great for rock climbing. In fact, if you are crazy enough to be into rock climbing, I think this is one of the top rock climbing destinations in the entire world, right outside Las Vegas. Anyway, whatever forces created Red Rock Canyon, it's long been appreciated as a place of exceptional beauty and relative comfort. We are at 3,500 feet here above sea level compared to down in the Vegas Valley where you're at like 2,000. So it's always about 10 to 15 degrees cooler up here, and there's a lot of water up here. Every single one of these canyons has springs, seeps, oases. So of course, Native Americans lived here for generations before the arrival of the white man. And then when the white man rolled in, well, he used a lot of these springs and seeps as campsites along the old Spanish Trail. Okay, that was the trail pioneered by the Spaniards going all the way from Santa Fe to Los Angeles. And those guys would travel through this valley to take advantage of all the water and, well, the relatively large amount of greenery so that their animals could drink and eat before heading even farther west across Death Valley. Anyway, of course it stands to reason that people have always wanted to live in a place of such spectacular beauty, especially nowadays that all this spectacular beauty is only 15 minutes from the nearest Quickie Mart. But even before Vegas sprawled this far west, people have always wanted to live out here, and this is probably the best known house out here. What's today known as the Spring Mountain Ranch has existed here for probably close to 200 years in one form or another. First as a campsite along the old Spanish Trail, and then as a sort of way station for travelers with a blacksmith. The famous mountain man Bill Williams came through here on one of his horse thieving runs, and for many years this place was known as the Old Williams Ranch, even though he probably never lived here. Well, the ranch changed hands many times over the years, and it had some pretty colorful owners, but none so colorful as Baroness Vera Krupp. Okay, Vera Krupp was a beautiful German actress who was married to Alfried Krupp, the notorious Nazi sympathizer whose company manufactured munitions for the Germans during World War II. And whether because of those negative associations or maybe the marriage just wasn't going too well, Vera Krupp just wanted to retire someplace beautiful in the desert, so she ended up here and gave it the name it still goes by to this day, Spring Mountain Ranch. Nowadays it's a state park with live theater and jazz and weddings and stuff like that. But when Vera Krupp lived here, it was just a good old-fashioned ranch house on the outskirts of Las Vegas, which wasn't even that big itself back then. Now, I guess she had divorced her husband by this time and she was living out here by herself, and I'm not really sure what she did all day other than prance around in these fabulous Western outfits with this giant diamond ring on her finger. Yeah, you've probably noticed this and wondered why I'm wearing this giant diamond ring. Well, that's because Vera Krupp always wore what was then called the Krupp diamond. Okay, I don't know a lot about jewelry either, but apparently it was a 33-carat diamond with 2 separate baguette-shaped diamonds on either side on this ring that she always wore on her finger until one day. Okay, it was right around this time of year. I think it was like April 10th, 1959, Vera Krupp and her ranch hand were having dinner. They were just sitting down to dinner in the ranch house when all of a sudden there was a knock at the door. And these 2 guys were standing there offering to blacktop her driveway. She had this long gravel driveway that went down to the, well, I guess there wasn't even a highway here back then, but she had a long gravel driveway. These 2 guys showed up offering to blacktop it for her. And before she knew what to say, well, I guess the 2 guys forced their way into the house, tied up Baroness Krupp and her ranch hand, and then stole the Krupp diamond ring off her finger. And apparently it was so tight on her finger that it even caused her to bleed when they pulled it off. And then they blindfolded her and the ranch hand, tied them together with a telephone cord, and then ransacked the house, and they took $700,000 in cash. And then they left, and I guess after a while, Vera Krupp and her ranch hand were able to free themselves, but the phone wasn't working up here, so they had to drive all the way down to the Las Vegas airport to call the authorities. Next thing you know, the FBI got involved because they figured the diamond was going to be transported across state lines, which it was. They eventually ended up tracking it down all the way in New Jersey. And, well, I think Vera Krupp kept the ring until she died in 1968. And then a guy named Dick Burton bought it for his wife, Liz Taylor, for $300,000, and it became known as the Elizabeth Taylor diamond, which I think it's still called to this day. But isn't that wild that all this happened out here in Red Rock Canyon? Anyway, when Baroness Krupp moved to Bel Air, she sold the ranch to Howard Hughes, because I guess she didn't want to see it get developed and turned into houses or condos, and she figured Howard Hughes wouldn't do anything with it, which he didn't. He ended up selling it to someone else, and I think it changed hands a couple more times before the state of Nevada finally bought it and turned it into this historical park. Okay, as if the story of Baroness Vera Krupp wasn't wild enough, well, there was another lady ranch boss living right down the road whose story was even wilder. Okay, I'm here at the former site of the Bonnie Springs Ranch. Anyone who grew up in or lived in Las Vegas in the 70s, 80s, 90s probably remembers this place. It had a petting zoo, an old Wild West town, a restaurant and a bar and a motel with all these super cheesy themed rooms. And this is a perfect example of why I should never procrastinate when it comes to making videos of interesting places. Because when I first started my channel, I had several people tell me, oh, you should go up to Bonnie Springs and do a video. But I thought, well, it's just a cheesy petting zoo and a Wild West town. It's not that much there. Well, guess what? They ended up bulldozing it to build houses. Well, they're going to build houses, and I'll get to that in a minute, but for now, let me just say that the history of this place is absolutely fascinating. So apparently there was this ex-showgirl named Bonnie McGo, I think is how you pronounced it, and she lived and worked in the Vegas area. Her and her mom ran a turkey farm down by 29 Palms, so I guess she used to come up to Vegas and deliver turkeys to some of the restaurants up here, and, well, I don't know, on one of her trips, she happened to come out here to beautiful Red Rock Canyon. There was this old, I guess at the time it was just kind of like really a busted old ranch house and an old saloon out here. She fell in love with it, and who wouldn't? So she decided to move out here, and, well, I don't know if she continued raising turkeys, but she operated the old saloon. It was open for many years, and back in those days, this was like the 1940s, I think. This was like the edge of the world, okay? Las Vegas was still a pretty small town in the 1940s. But people would drive all the way out here on this, I mean, it was a bumpy dirt road back then, to go have drinks at this old Wild West saloon run by this retired showgirl. I told you this place had a fabulous history, and I'm even more mad at myself now that I didn't come up here sooner and make a video while it was still open. Anyway, Bonnie was living up here running this awesome saloon. One evening, a gentleman of means, a car dealer by the name of Al Levinson, came in, and well, they fell in love. They ended up getting married, and he moved out here with her, and Bonnie and Al ran this place for decades. The motel, the saloon, I guess Bonnie had a soft spot for animals. She was always taking in stray animals, and then it got to the point where people would come up here and just sadly abandon their animals because they knew she would take care of them. So they ended up opening up this petting zoo in this old Wild West town, and oh man, it was amazing. I did go here a couple times before it closed. I went into the saloon. The saloon was really cool. It was one of those old, all wooden Wild West saloons with like dollar bills stapled all over the walls. And there were neckties stapled all over the ceiling because apparently Al Levinson had a beef or a grudge because back in the day he tried to go to like the Dunes Steakhouse, or one of the steakhouses at those old time hotels back in the day when you had to dress up to go to dinner in Vegas. Well, he was wearing a bolo tie, like a cowboy string tie, and they wouldn't let him in the steakhouse. And so ever after that, I guess he was salty. And so anytime somebody came into the saloon here at Bonnie Springs Ranch, well, he would take their necktie and staple it to the ceiling. I mean, again, I would give anything to go back in time to Vegas in those days. It must have been absolutely incredible. Can you imagine driving this bumpy dirt road out to the edge of town, past the Baroness's place, to this old saloon that had neckties stapled all over the ceiling? Anyway, I guess Bonnie ended up living out here for a long time. I don't think she died until 2016. She lived a nice long life. Must be this fresh Red Rock Canyon air. But then I guess her kids didn't really want to keep up the place anymore, and so they sold the property to, wait for it, a developer. Wah, wah, wah. And when the news was announced that Bonnie Springs Ranch was closing, boy howdy, did people in Vegas make a stink. I mean, like I said, anybody who lived here or grew up here back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, even me, I didn't move to Vegas until 2000. I came up here and went to the petting zoo. It was a cool place. I mean, I'll be honest, it was pretty hokey, but it was still cool. And it sucks to see stuff like that bulldozed so that some rich D-bags can build houses. But unfortunately, that's just what's going to happen. Now, to be fair, though, I did read up on the guy who won the bid and bought the property, and he actually doesn't sound that bad. I know people are really up in arms about what he's doing, but from what I read, he was a member of the Nature Conservancy, so he's already kind of like an environmentally minded dude. And I guess by buying this property, he was sort of saving it from other less environmentally responsible developers, in theory, I guess. Because I guess what he's going to do is subdivide this into 16 lots. There's only going to be 16 lots up here. You can buy a lot, you have to build your own house on it. But it has to, I guess your plans have to conform to certain environmental standards, and supposedly nothing will be able to be seen from the highway. So when you're taking that beautiful Red Rock Canyon scenic drive, you won't notice anything out here. You won't notice the fact that there's 16 luxury estates back here. I mean, it could have been worse. One of the other guys trying to buy it, I think, wanted to put a casino back here. But still, like I said, a lot of longtime Las Vegans are still real salty about the fact that this place got shut down, and he closed the petting zoo, and he closed the Wild West town. But apparently he did adopt out all the animals from the petting zoo. They all found homes. And then the Wild West town, somebody either bought it or is going to buy it and move it somewhere else. So calm down. Don't get your panties in a bunch. It could have been much worse. Matter of fact, there's been a huge fight over another proposed housing development across the way on the other side of the highway. I think on top of this bluff here. I don't know if you can tell, but that's like a really big bluff. And if you were to climb to the top of it and look over the other side, you'd look right down onto the shining bright lights of Las Vegas. But if a developer by the name of Jim Rhodes had his way, that bluff would be covered in houses. And I think he's still fighting it in city council. Like, I don't remember how many houses he wanted to build up there, but I think it was in the thousands. It was going to be a pretty substantial number of homes up there, this whole new development. And well, folks around here are pretty passionate about Red Rock Canyon. Well, you can probably see why. It's absolutely beautiful. It's the closest thing Las Vegas really has to a central park. I mean, there are parks in Vegas, but they're not really that nice. This is a place where, oh my God, people come from all over the world to go hiking, rock climbing, mountain biking. I mean, this is world-class, beautiful scenery. And people around here don't look too kindly on these developers coming in and trying to build houses here. So, like I said at the beginning of the video, I'd like to live out here, but if you want to live in Red Rock Canyon, well, your options are pretty limited. Okay, Baroness Krupp's place is a museum now. And if you want to buy one of these parcels here at the former Bonnie Springs Ranch, which I think is now called, it's called the Ranch at Red Rock, or the Reserve at Red Rock. Well, go to their website and you tell me how much you think they're going for. Millions of dollars, and that's just for the land. Then you got to build your own house. Now, if you're lucky, you could score a house here in Blue Diamond. About 300 people live in this tiny bedroom community, which was founded as a company town for a nearby gypsum mine back in the 1940s. And nowadays it has its own library and its own post office, and there's even a little cafe, and it's super cute and super quaint. And it's hard to believe it's literally right outside Las Vegas. But it's also one of those places where people hardly ever move out of, so good luck finding a house here. Actually, I used to know somebody I know somebody who used to live here, and his house was amazing, but he did move. Anyway, there's one other place you could potentially buy a house out here, if you're both lucky and loaded. This is a place called Calico Basin, just off to the right before you get to Red Rock Canyon Park, and there's a bunch of houses out here. When I was working as a nude model, we used to come out here and do photo shoots because it's not technically part of Red Rock Canyon Park, even though it has the same kind of topography. So there's no entrance fee and there's not as many crowds. And anytime I came out here, I would absolutely drool over some of the houses. I don't want to get arrested for trespassing, so I'm just going to zoom in. Some of these places are out of sight. I mean, yeah, some of them kind of just look like giant McMansions, but giant McMansion or no, this is your backyard. So I could put up with quite a bit of hideous architecture to live here, but they're not all ugly. Like, look at this place. Okay, again, I don't want to get arrested for trespassing, but oh my God, you probably can't even tell, but it's this really cool sort of terracotta orange house backed right up against Red Rock Park. I mean, this is like the greatest location on the face of the earth. Okay, well, it's no Malibu, but it's the greatest location on the face of the Las Vegas Valley. Ugh. Can you imagine? I mean, who needs a Krupp diamond with a house like that? Oh, well, who knows? Maybe one of these days I'll get lucky and win the lottery and I'll be able to afford my own place up here in Red Rock Canyon. But honestly, it's not very likely. I mean, they're limited as to how many houses they can build up here because of all these environmental regulations. And, well, some of these existing homes look like they were just sort of grandfathered in. You know, like some old-time rancher built a house up here and didn't expect it to become so popular. So there's a few places up here that could be charitably called fixer-uppers, but even those are going to skyrocket in value just for the land because there's so few places that you're allowed to build a house out here. So in a way, I can understand why Jim Rhodes wanted to build all those houses on that bluff over there somewhere. I mean, why should only a handful of ultra rich people be able to live out here? You know, is that really fair? But then again, who wants to see a bunch of ticky-tacky little boxes on the beautiful bluff overlooking Red Rock Canyon? Anyway, I don't know. What do you think? Should they allow more houses to be built up here? Or should they try to keep this place semi-wild and natural? I mean, like I said, hundreds of thousands of people come up here every year to go hiking and mountain biking and rock climbing. So it is adding something to the economy, keeping it wild and natural. But on the other hand, why should only a few of the richest elites be able to live up here when the rest of us are stuck in the city? I mean, how do you decide who gets to live in a place we all want to enjoy?